I'm Sue O'Connell in for Jim Browdy, and tonight on Greater Boston, hey, time is running out for action on Beacon Hill for some big priority issues, among them securing abortion access and funding our collective lives for the current fiscal year. GBH's Adam Reilly and Katie Lannan will join me on the sticking points and likely paths forward for those issues and more. Then, remarkable new images of galaxies far, far away, farther than ever before, in fact, all thanks to an ambitious new telescope that's the focus of a new NOVA documentary premiering tonight. I'm joined by the film's director and a NASA astrophysicist on what we hope to see and learn. With Jim out today, I'd like to take the opportunity to pick up the baton on one of his favorite complaints, which is also one of my favorite complaints of this season: the state legislators' biennial multi-month break, which before they rushed to finish, all that wasn't done in the 2 years prior. And this year there are some really big ones, among them a budget deal for the fiscal year that began 12 days ago, a bill aimed at expanding access to public meetings, and protections for out-of-state patients seeking abortions and those who treat them now that Roe has been overturned. And on that last point, there are some big divides between the House and the Senate. So what will they get done before the clock runs out? And what will get pushed down the road even further? I'm joined by GBH News reporter and host of Talking Politics, Adam Reilly, and new GBH News State House reporter, Katie Lannan. I'm not even going to get into how frustrating this is to me every single year about how they're surprised there's a deadline and things don't get done, right? But look, there are some really, not that there aren't every year, but this year there are some really urgent issues, especially around abortion. Adam, I want to show us first a letter that Senate President Karen Spilka sent out regarding trying to bring together the House and Senate colleagues. We write to urge a letter to Spilka, I'm sorry, saying we write to urge our Senate colleagues to accept the House provisions in H. 4954, an act expanding protections for reproductive rights, specifically the measures that clarify the statutory framework for abortions and expand access to emergency contraception in an immediate and accessible fashion. Adam, so they need to be reached out to come to a conclusion here and be led in the right way. What's happening with this?
Well, what I think is really interesting about this is that there's been this stereotype that's held true about the Senate and the House in the legislature in all the years that I've covered them, which is that the House is the more conservative body fiscally, but also socially. The Senate is unabashedly progressive and in a hurry to do great big things, and the House has to kind of be dragged along. The letter you sent is, among other things, to me, evidence of the fact that that is no longer the case. That letter was written by Kate Hogan. She's, I believe, the second-ranking member of the House, second-ranking Democrat in the House. And what she wants to do is change state law so that you can get a late-term abortion if the fetus has not just lethal abnormalities, but severe abnormalities. And she wants the Department of Public Health to incorporate the perspective of women who have had to leave Massachusetts to get an abortion as they figure out how this is going to work. It is, as you hinted at, really unusual to see one chamber call out the other, not in a sort of a snide aside from one of the leaders, but in a detailed, public, and somewhat lengthy manner. That letter was signed by close to 100 of Hogan's colleagues in the House. So, there's a bunch of different angles we can come at this from, but I think it's a fascinating testament to, again, how our expectations about the legislature are being subverted right now.
Katie, folks from out of state are always surprised that this democratically controlled House and Senate in Massachusetts always seems to be slow in getting things done. And with this sense of urgency, which I think it's safe to say that most lawmakers believe there is a sense of urgency, what are you hearing from senators regarding these proposals and from representatives? Are they going to be able to work together to get a progressive, expanded protection through before the deadline?
That's really the big question here is, are they going to be able to get it done? The senators like their bill in part because they think it will address potential concerns from Governor Baker, who has vetoed abortion legislation before because of the concerns he has around abortions later in pregnancy. So the senators think that with the clock ticking, And, it's July 31 is when legislative sessions end. But if they want to give themselves time to respond to any amendments, to override a potential veto for the governor, the Senate is saying that keeping that later pregnancy abortion language out and coming back to it later on is the safest move for now to almost better their odds of getting something over the finish line. The Senate today announced a working group that's going to plan to explore that or other issues for maybe longer term future action after this summer.
Adam, just quickly, I mean, do you think that the voters of Massachusetts, what do you think they would be satisfied with? Do you think they would be satisfied with a compromise bill that Baker would sign, or something that is more aggressive and progressive that Baker would veto?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not up to speed on the latest polling around this issue, but I think I can say, Katie, tell me if I'm wrong here, that what advocates want to see, the people who are pushing for Massachusetts to move in the opposite direction, now that the Supreme Court's taken away the constitutional right to an abortion, they really want to see the measures that the House is pushing embraced. And just to harken back, Sue, to your original point, one reason that you don't put off everything until the absolute possible last minute is that if you do and something unexpected happens, then it becomes difficult for you to deal with. As Katie just said, the Senate's worried about having time to override the veto. That might not be as much of a concern if they'd done more of this stuff a little bit earlier on.
Katie, let's talk about sports betting. I know this isn't as urgent an issue for many in their lives, but this is one I feel like I've been talking about for forever. And as states around Massachusetts have legalized sports betting and are bragging, right or wrong, about the tax revenues that they're bringing in, where are the lawmakers at the State House on legalized sports betting for Massachusetts?
So both the House and the Senate have now passed bills that would legalize sports betting. Something that a lot of people are interested in. That's one of the bills that I think I'm most often asked about when I'm talking to people who aren't spending all their days in the State House. But the bills are very different, and they are one of several pieces of legislation that are in conference committees right now. So it's a group of 3 senators, 3 representatives conducting closed door negotiations that we really can't tell how things are going at that point. Like abortion legislation, like everything else, it's got to be done by July 31st if it's going to get done. And a while ago, Speaker Mariano, when we asked him about where things were, he said that both sides were going to have to be willing to move to get to a deal. We don't know how much they might have moved at this point. One of the big sticking points is around college sports betting, whether or not to authorize that. There's also different tax rates and consumer protection measures at play here. So there's a lot of parts that need to be ironed out.
Adam, there doesn't, I mean, again, since we've been talking about this for many years, it doesn't seem like there's a heck of a big demand from voters to get this done. Although people complain about it all the time, here we are.
I don't know if there's a big demand or not. I mean, as Katie just mentioned, she has anecdotal evidence that people care a lot about this. It seems like it's something that is of intense interest to the media, and I think that there's maybe some anecdotal evidence from WGBH even that when we run stories about it, people are interested in reading them. However, Senate President Karen Spilka said something similar to what you just did when she was asked about the divide between the Senate and the House at a media availability a couple months ago. And she essentially said, people don't care about this. When I go out in my district, when I go talk to voters, this isn't something they're asking about. So I think if you're taking bets on what is and isn't going to get done before the end of the session, the fact that she feels that way, that this is not an issue that's top of mind or of high concern to voters, is probably a reason to put this on your, maybe they won't get this done list.
All right, Katie, one thing they have to get done is the budget. We're already into the fiscal year. We've got tax relief issues. What are you hearing about the budget process and what's on the table for tax relief for who?
Yeah, the budget process is another black box conference committee situation. We're hearing that they might be getting somewhat close to a deal. Now, what close means when you're talking about $50 billion could be any number of things, but the state's not at risk of any sort of government shutdown or anything of the like because they have a temporary budget in place that runs through the end of July. which keeps services operational, but it also kind of removes some of the incentive to get a deal done quickly once you're already in July. Tax relief is a separate matter. The legislature opted to keep that out of the budget. And the House and the Senate this week announced that they have reached a deal on some ideas. Some of the measures that the legislature is now pursuing include one-time rebates for kind of middle income taxpayers is what they're trying to target. There's also relief that they're eyeing for renters, for seniors, for low-income workers, for parents with children. And one of the more controversial pieces so far has been that they are agreeing with Governor Charlie Baker and looking to reform the estate tax in some way, something that more progressive advocates tend to criticize as a break for the wealthiest. Supporters of, dealing with that inheritance tax, of reforming it, point to the rising home values across Massachusetts. Someone who's thought of themselves for middle class for years might be surprised to find out that their home now is worth $1 million and their heirs are going to be taxed on that value.
Yeah, oddly, I mean, I know everybody always thinks they're going to grow up to be a millionaire, and many people accidentally have. Adam, the virtual meetings and the open meetings issues, we're into the junior year of the pandemic here. We're all virtual. It still seems that lawmakers are trying to catch up to where humans are and how we're working. Any news on predictions on what will happen with those arcane laws that we all care about?
I want Katie to check me here and make sure that I have the right takeaway. But my understanding is that both chambers agree that we need to maintain the ability for people to participate in public meetings, not just by going there in person, but also by logging in and having video and audio access as we have during the pandemic. I think that while there's broad agreement, their mechanics or their mechanisms for getting to a point where that access is extended, there's some differences which again need to be hashed out along with everything else that's happening at this point in time, their overwhelming to-do list. I would say that the fact that there is strong consensus that we just can't keep operating the way we used to when you had to actually go to the State House if you wanted to catch one of the meetings that we're allowed to catch. I think that ultimately something's going to get done. Might get done this session. If it doesn't, I expect it'll get done early next session. But I would love to hear Katie's take.
Yeah, go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, there's a even closer deadline. Some of those pandemic era remote authorizations expire on Friday. Now, I believe they've let this lapse before because they've been extending it in kind of little chunks. And when they did ultimately agree, they did it retroactively to cover the times that had already passed. So even if, the calendar turns to Friday and they haven't reached a deal on how long to extend that authorization. And there's also some additional provisions about notary services and remote notarization that are wrapped up in this, that the branches are.
Wow, it's kind of like those pictures from outer space we're seeing. There's the past, and it's just arriving to us now, and now we're notarizing things with a thingy.
It's beautiful and humbling.
There you go.
I know where you're going with
All right, Adam Reilly and Katie Lannan. Next up, as I just mentioned, we got an eye-popping new view of the cosmos this week, thanks to the first images from a powerful new telescope that lets us see farther into the depths of the universe and further back in time than we ever have before.
Amazing things about telescopes is that they are literally time machines. They allow us to see the universe as it was in the distant past.
The nearest star to us is 4 light years away. That means light has taken 4 years to arrive to us.
We are actually able to see in the past by looking at distant galaxies because that light left so long ago, we're seeing them as they were in the past.
And not only that, but this new telescope is able to collect these beautiful detailed images far faster than the older technology.
This is an engineering image that was really there just to say we focused it right, and there's a lot of galaxies. The engineers were like, what are all those galaxies doing there? We're realizing we're the first people that have ever seen these galaxies.
Since the first Hubble Deep Fields in the 90s, where Hubble just stared at an empty patch of the sky for for days at a time and made this beautiful deep field. We just did that in about under an hour. What that makes possible is that every field's a deep field now. There are observations planned that are weeks long instead of just an hour. Everything about these images that I've seen so far tells us absolutely this thing is going to be fantastic.
We don't know what we're going to see, but we know we haven't seen anything like this before.
This is going to be transformative. This is looking amazing.
And it's all made possible by the James Webb Space Telescope, a 30-year, $10 billion project chronicled in NOVA's latest documentary, Ultimate Space Telescope, which, thank goodness, premieres tonight. And I'm joined by the director, Terri Randall, and Dr. Knicole Colón, an astrophysicist with NASA and Webb Deputy Project Scientist for Exoplanet Science. Dr. Colón, I want to start with you first because, you know, every day I come home from work and I sit with my daughter and we talk about the news of the day, and she asked me to describe what we saw. And I said, well, it's the past, but it's the future, and it's a grain of sand, and it's kind of like the end of Men in Black when they open the locker and everybody's in there. Can you tell us, what is it that we were looking at?
Yes. So that's the exciting thing, is that when we have a telescope like this, it's almost like a time machine, right? We can look at these galaxies. We took these images, last month, but the light in those images took 13 billion years to get to our telescope. And that's because they formed in the early universe. So if you look at those now, those galaxies are probably not there today. They've probably already merged and done, things where they cause new stars to form and die and all that. But we can capture their light because it just got to us from back when they first formed.
And can you explain to me how did this just like happen? I know this has been hundreds of years in the making, but everyone seems so amazed that this is what we're seeing. Is that all true? Like, it just happened, we did it, it worked, and now we're shocked to see how beautiful and vast the universe and everything is without us having known before?
Well, whenever we develop any new telescope, including the James Webb Space Telescope, we definitely predict what we're going to see. This telescope was designed to see some of the early light from the universe. But what we don't always expect is how good things will work once we're up in space. A launch has to go perfectly. All the deployments have to go perfectly. The mirrors have to be really clean. And we can just collect images sometimes better than we expected. And so it is thanks to the work of thousands of people, including so many engineers and scientists, that has led us to this point today.
Terri Randall, talk to me about your reaction. Obviously, you've been very immersed, if you will, in these issues and in this science. But when you saw these photos and the images that have been coming up, what was your reaction?
Well, relief with the team that everything was working, because until they, start taking those pictures, I mean, this is such an engineering marvel, and it's such a feat of engineering. And they had so many years of ups and downs that once it was launched, we were excited. Once it was the 2 weeks of deployment, everybody was on edge, and just, it's wonderful to see what they've accomplished.
Talk to me, Terri, talk to me about the science of this telescope and some of the comparisons between what we had and what we were relying on and what this telescope can do versus the other technology we have. And I say we like I was involved in it, but you know what I mean?
This is what we talk about in the program, is that the mirror is huge in comparison to Hubble. It's 1 million miles from Earth, so it's in a position where it can get images like this that are very hard to get. And it's got this huge sun shield that's shielding it from the light of the Earth and the moon and the sun, so it really can peer deeply into space. And those things really make it totally unique.
And how does this contribute? Obviously, I know that scientists both love to be proven right and proven wrong because it helps them to advance discovery and science, and this helps to prove them right in many cases when compared to the Hubble, the Webb compared to the Hubble, what the Hubble saw. How does this contribute overall to our scientific community?
Wow, what the scientists were telling me over and over again is this is the future. of space science in the community around the world. So if it didn't work, it would have been a disaster for that. But the fact that it is working and working better than they thought it was going to work. I think there are questions, as they tell me all the time, there are questions that they haven't even begun to pose about what they're going to start to learn and what questions will come up based on what they learned. But I don't think there's an area of space science they're not going to cover with this telescope.
Knicole, I kept hearing over and over about this grain of sand that folks were looking at, and that I got lost on that part, and also learning that there's so much more to be seen, that this is, again, just a tiny grain of sand. Can you explain to me what we're looking at and how much of it we're seeing? And this deep view part, can you explain that to me too?
Yes. Yeah. So I think it's another analogy I've heard is, imagine holding up your hand extended to to the sky, and you put your thumbprint, that part of the sky that you cover with your fingertip, it's the size of the deep field. So imagine how many parts of the sky there are. There are that many galaxies times that many parts of the sky. It's trillions of galaxies. So Webb has looked at one tiny portion of our universe already in just these few images, and including the deep field. But even Stefan's quintet with the merging galaxies, there's a bunch of galaxies behind there photobombing, that quintet. And there's just galaxies everywhere. So yeah, almost every image is a deep field, exactly.
And Terri, let's talk about the world of space business and space science. We are in our lifetimes living in such a different world. I mean, I vividly recall when I was, 6 and we landed on the moon, and NASA and the space race, and it was then the period where it seemed it was not going to be a priority, and there's been all of these budget discussions about where it should go and where it shouldn't. And now we've got this, private industry of space business, I'll call it space business, which is leading in some ways the technology. What does this do now for the everyday person when they're thinking about what we should be funding, when they watch NOVA, when they watch the program tonight? What do you think they're going to come away with?
Well, hopefully they'll be inspired by just the sheer beauty of what we're seeing. And I think inspired by a team of researchers from around the world who came together and could work together, regardless of language or background, and could do something so difficult and make it work. So I'm inspired by this group effort. And I think this can be done in many different areas of problems that we face. I think science is an example of that.
Knicole, I was also struck by watching NASA reach out to so many viewers across the world when these pictures were revealed, and seeing the joy and the excitement. It must feel so great to be connected to people reacting in that way.
I can't even put it into words. It's so humbling, really, to see reactions from, not just friends and family, but like you said, the entire community, the public, humans, right, as a society, that they can appreciate the beauty of the universe with Webb and these first images. There's just, so much joy that we want to share, because this is a telescope, for everybody to understand our universe. The scientists, we use the data, we get the images, we analyze them, but it's all so that we can communicate to the public what we learn, right? And what that means about our place in the universe.
Terri, there was that moment, of course, in the 60s, the little blue dot, when astronauts in space saw the Earth, and we sort of saw ourselves for the first time where we were in relation to the rest of the universe and the galaxy. Obviously, the 60s were a very divisive time. We're in a very divisive time right now. Do you think that this shared experience, this working on the James Webb Space telescope and seeing these photos, do you think this is an opportunity for humanity to see where we are and maybe find some unity?
I hope so. I think that scientists, seeing these teams and over the next many years, 10 to 20 years, teams around the world are working together. The what they call the early release science, which will be starting, I think, even tomorrow. If you look at the teams, there's members from everywhere, and they're all coming together either on Zoom or in person to work together. So it is a great example of cooperation.
How long were you working on Ultimate Space Telescope? How long have you been working on the program?
Actively for about a year, but NOAA started looking into it in 2017. But as you know, it was delayed. So we were very, very happy that 2021 worked out, because we had started working on the film and then the launch was delayed and it was delayed. And it was like, we really hope we started this at the right time. Knicole knows this well.
I can only imagine. And then, certainly having a positive result certainly helps as well, not just for all of us. Knicole, one thing that I've been fascinated about learning over the pandemic and all the reading that I've been doing about how differently everybody views, including all species, view things. How animals see different colors, how we have different feelings, how our brains are oriented between each other, how my heartbeat and my blood pressure impacts what I see. Like, we're all living in our own hallucination. And this, to me, really struck me as a hallucination. Seeing things that we couldn't see before just really opens up the possibility of what we're not seeing. Is that exciting, scary? What do you feel when you think about the enormity of that?
It's definitely fascinating to me. One thing that I didn't realize, even myself, or I didn't appreciate it, like you said, we are literally seeing things a new way, right, with this telescope. Our range of colors in the visible light is very limited, actually. We have a lot of colors, but it's such a tiny part of what we call the electromagnetic spectrum. So the infrared light that Webb can access, it covers so many more colors, if you will, and we don't even have enough colors to relate to that. So we get to see so much more information. It's almost overwhelming, but in a good way.
I'm going to keep that positive viewpoint that it's a good thing, and I'm not going to totally freak out. I'll be certainly watching tonight, Terri. NOVA's Ultimate Space Telescope is on tonight. It premieres at 9 on GBH2 and online at pbs.org/NOVA. Terri Randall and Knicole Colón, thank you so much. Congratulations to both of you for your work and all that you're doing. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
That's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Good night.